following podcast is part of the Underdog Sports Podcasting Network. For a full list of our shows, as well as breaking sports news and engaging feature stories, visit us at www.theunderdogsports.com.
Talking around the bases with Ryan Carter and Logan Smith.
Welcome to Talking Around the Bases, episode 13. My name is Ryan Carter, and I'm joined again this week by Logan Smith. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about another full week of action in the books for the Major League Baseball season, and the trend of coldness and postponements continues, as well as a couple teams who have had pretty much their hot streaks keep on going, and some teams who have had their cold streaks extend as well. So without further ado, Logan, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great, man. Like you said, just enjoying another week of baseball, and whenever we can actually watch a game, like you said, with all those postponements. But yeah, man. I mean, we're getting into the swing of things now. I think some teams are finally starting to get it figured out. We're almost through a month here soon, so it's always great watching baseball and talking baseball with you, man.
Yeah, and that Sunday, after we recorded last Saturday, there was a couple games that I was really excited to see, and then got postponed. I think it's the most postponements early in the season I've ever seen. This one had like 6 on Sunday, so it's been crazy. I think that every place I'm looking, you see just players with those. I don't know what even to call them, like the neck hoods and stuff around their heads so they can keep warm. And the weather is just crazy anyways. I hope it just move on, because we're almost at the end of April and it's super cold here, and we're on the East Coast, and it's just not normal, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't know how to take it with stats and whatnot, because, maybe a pitcher had a bad outing, but then you don't know if that's just because maybe it was so cold they couldn't even get a grip on the ball, or the wind was blowing out, or the wind was blowing in for a hitter. You just don't know right now, because like you said, the weather's been so bad. I know Anthony Rizzo came out and said that maybe they should play less baseball games, and they would just take a pay cut, and they could start maybe later on into April. I mean, obviously, I don't think that'll ever happen, because I don't think the owners would want to make less money. But maybe something that baseball should probably do is maybe early in the year start at either like southern stadiums, or stadiums with with roofs, or with retractable roofs on them. So that way, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Like I was talking with one guy, and Milwaukee and San Diego have had they played a series together to start the year, and it's like, okay, well, Milwaukee has a roof, and San Diego obviously has great weather, so each one of those teams should be home teams. Maybe if they thought about things like that, instead of trying to have so many games in Detroit or Minnesota, because we've seen so many of their games get rained out, and have more games in Tampa, Miami, Texas, Houston. It's something that they'll definitely try to figure out. I think next year you might see some changes coming, because it's just crazy with how many games have been postponed.
Yeah, and all over the place, in Boston and then Chicago and all these places, just the weather has looked awful. I hopefully that they can figure something out, and maybe it's just this year, because last year, I mean, it wasn't really this cold around this time, and the winter time really wasn't a winter time, because there was a lot of warm weather during December around here. So I don't know, maybe it's just something with the weather just this year, and hopefully it'll just subside for next year. But moving on from the weather standpoint for postponements, I mean, there's a couple teams that are just still playing super, super well despite the weather, and that one of those teams is Boston, who doesn't seem to lose a game. They're now sitting at 17-2.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's one of the best starts that a team's been out to, I think, within like 10 or 12 years. I mean, 17-2, that's absolutely just crazy. Mookie Betts is leading the charge for them. He's batting .382 with a .470 OBP. He's had 6 home runs, 14 RBIs. He's actually absolutely just crushed the Angels this series. And the craziest part of Boston is, some of their guys are out. I mean, Bogarts is hurt right now. Pedroia's out right now. Their starting pitching's been good. It still hasn't been great yet. I mean, Price has been a lot better than what he was last year, and obviously Sale's been great. Porcello's been good. But the main thing with them is they've gotten help out of their, 5 spot. Like Brian Johnson's pitched well. Hector Vasquez has pitched well, and now they finally got Eduardo Rodriguez back, who pitched pretty good the other night against Oakland. So, their bullpen's still a concern. Pomeranz pitched off the DL last night. He didn't really pitch very well, but, it was his first start back. But, Kimbrel's been great. Like I said, Sale's been awesome. But man, Mookie Betts, he's been lighting the world on fire.
Yeah, Mookie Betts, it seems, is just leading off every game with a home run. I mean, which is good for fantasy owners because, like me, I have him on my league, but not so good for the teams going up against him, and definitely not so good against the Orioles, who just I don't know what it is. I feel like someone cursed them or hoodoo vexed them or something, because a lot of the games I watch, I'm just seeing some crazy stuff. Like earlier, you were talking about wind blowing in and out, and I mean, they got swept by Detroit, and Detroit's, like we said, is awful. So I guess that just puts the Orioles at awful so far. And Cashner, again, pitched really well. At least I'm sort of right so far about him. I mean, not winning the Cy Young, but I mean, he's pitching really well. He turned in his third quality start. And I was watching that game, and there was a ball hit in the air, which looks like a routine fly ball for right field, and it just kept going and carrying, and the wind just pushed it straight out for a 2-run home run. And I think that was Victor Martinez who ended up hitting that one. And it's been crazy. On the flip side, in the AL East, with the Orioles just not seeming to be able to win a game. I mean, they did finally, get a win after a 6-game losing streak off the Indians last night, but it's been a rough go for them, and especially Alex Cobb, who I think will definitely turn it around. I think they rushed him a little too early. And I mean, like you said, you never know with the weather being so cold. I think the Orioles haven't played in a warm spot all year, so maybe that'll get them heated up.
Yeah, I mean, Scope's kind of been off to a slow start for him, but honestly, the offense has kind of turned it around. Machado's been good, Mancini's been good, but like you said, it's the pitching. You've got Bundy, who's been good, really good. 1.42 ERA, and Cashner's been pretty good, like you said, three just a straight 3 ERA. But man, I mean, Alex Cobb in 2 starts, he has a 15 ERA. Chris Tillman in 3 starts has a 12 ERA. Michael Givens hasn't been good for them. Gosman, his ERA is just over 5.5. Even O'Day has an over 4 ERA. So, obviously with the Orioles, it's going to be their pitching for a long time, and that's what it seems to be this year again. But man, I mean, right now Boston's, they've got a 4-game lead just because Toronto, surprisingly, I don't think most people would have them as second. Toronto's 13-6, and then you have a 7.5-game lead over the Yankees, who are 9-9. And for the Orioles, maybe you put a curse on them by picking them. I don't really know, but looking up, I mean, by the end, it's not even the end of April, and they're almost 12 games out of first place. It's like that's never a spot where you want to be, even if it is still early.
Yeah, definitely, and especially against a lot of these teams that they face that are, they could easily beat. Now their schedule has been really rough to start the season. Other than Detroit, I mean, they face Minnesota, who currently is still leading that division barely because, I mean, they haven't really played a game in like a month, it seems. And then, they had to go up against Houston, and then they played Boston. They had to play the Yankees. They played really well against the Yankees. I thought they'd be fine. They took, 3 out of 4 against them. And then they have to go up against Cleveland now. So, I mean, their schedule hasn't been really that great. They played Toronto as well. Like we mentioned, they have a hot start so far. So, I mean, their schedule hasn't been good. The weather, I don't think they're a cold ball weather team, definitely, because I mean, they have just had a rough go of things. I have no clue what's going on. And now Mancini may be out just for a little bit because he punctured his knee sliding to make a catch last night. Of course, Scope is out for a bit. So injury plagued. Ball's just not going their way.
Yeah, man, and I mean, another team that seems to be kind of stuck in the mud so far in that same division is the Yankees. Sanchez, batting 182. Stanton finally got over the 200 mark. He's at 205 now, but still, I mean, that lineup is just not what they were expecting so far. Judge has been good. He's batting over 300. Gregorius has been awesome. But man, they've had injuries. Tyler Austin has stepped up pretty well for him so far with the Greg Bird injury. But overall, I mean, they were expecting a lot more out of Stanton and Sanchez. I guarantee it. Stanton's still hearing some boo birds with the Yankees. Still striking out a lot. He's fallen back a little bit. He's only sixth highest in the league in strikeouts with 29 so far. But still, man. I mean, maybe he's not used to the cold weather because obviously in Miami, maybe he's not used to as much pressure. Playing with the Yankees now over the Marlins, but him and Sanchez are definitely going to have to get going if they want the Yankees to kind of get hot. Right now, they're sitting right around 500, and their pitching really hasn't helped them out much either. I mean, Sonny Gray's been bad. Tanaka hasn't been good. Betances hasn't been good. I mean, they still have a lot of weak spots with that roster so far that they're going to have to try to get figured out. And I mean, like you said, it's still early. But when you have a team going as good as Boston is, you're kind of like almost have more pressure on you just because you're trying to hold, you're trying to stay with them.
Yeah, and you know what? I hate the Yankees. So, I mean, we know that. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I hate the Yankees. I am glad that this is happening. No offense to any Yankees fans. But here's the thing. I hope that it stays like this all season, and this is the way it finishes. I would be fine with Baltimore finishing last, even losing 100 games. I don't care. I would be fine with it. Just because I know the Yankees are overrated and not as good as people think. I mean, of course, Greg Bird is hurt, of course, but it all comes down to one thing for me with the Yankees. I mean, they're hitting well. It's their pitching. I think their pitching is still absolutely terrible. I think Tanaka's overrated. He got blown up again by the Marlins. I just think it's going to be rough for them if they don't get some help pitching. CeCe, obviously, really, he's old now. He had injury issues, so he's out. Severino's obviously really good. I think that's the one bright spot in their rotation, but it's going to be hard for them to keep up with Boston's rotation and the way they're hitting right now. It's just, I don't think they're going to do it. Unfortunately, at this rate, I think that it's still, like you said, it's early, so they can turn it around and maybe get to the wild card, but I just don't know with their pitching if they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the Yankees, so, obviously I think they'll make some moves probably to acquire some starters just because I don't think right now their rotation is going to be good enough. And the bullpen's been really bad, which I don't think anybody was really expecting. So maybe they're just not liking it up there in the cold so far. But I think the main thing whenever you're looking at that squad is you just have to really wait for Stanton and Sanchez to get going. And hopefully for Yankees fans, once they do get going, it'll just be all in once, and they'll really make a charge after the first place in that division.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Sonny Gray had another awful outing again, and it was reported that he had probably identified the mechanical flaw that was holding back his top level performance. And I found that funny because I was thinking to myself, the top level performance would be is he only really pitched well in Oakland in that stadium, and I think Sonny Gray was overrated. He had his really good years in the beginning, but I feel like he really isn't the same pitcher after that first couple years he had with Oakland, and he hasn't been pitching well with the Yankees either. So yeah, I mean they can make a move to try to get a pitcher, but I think they got to get two pitchers because one's just not going to cut it. Because I mean, Gray is just like I said, I don't think Gray is very good. Tanaka, I think, is overrated, of course. Severino's really good. Montgomery is still, the book's out on him. He's been pitching well. I think he's pitching again today, looking to go back-to-back wins, but that's going to be tough against, the Blue Jays, who's rolling Stroman out there, who hasn't really looked good this season, but it's still Stroman. And, maybe the Yankees could turn it around. I'm hoping not, but maybe they can. One team that I'm glad is still playing well, though, is the Brewers, who are battling it out with Pittsburgh and St. Louis and that division that's super, super close-knit. And all I got to say is, he's back. The guy from Pepperdine University lighting up the home run scoreboard again, Eric Thames. He's got 7 now. It continues to go up.
Yeah, man, he's been awesome. I mean, he's crushing, he's crushing the Reds especially, who just made a manager's change. They fired Brian Price and they let the assistant manager Jim Riggleman step in. But I mean, Eric Thames kills him. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He seems to have come over and just absolutely had one thing in mind, and if he was going to crush a team, it was just going to be the Reds. But yeah, I mean, Lorenzo Cain's been a really good pickup for them. He's batting over 300. Christian Yelich, who's been injured, but he's finally back. He's been really playing well for him. The main thing that's really interesting to see is how much playing time each one of those guys get. You've got Eric Thames, you've got Ryan Braun, you've got Domingo Santana, and it seems like all of those guys are kind of playing for two positions. Because obviously they're not really going to sit Kane and Yelich a lot. So it's been interesting to see how the manager does a good job of playing all those guys at different positions. But yeah, I mean, they've been awesome so far. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Travis Shaw has been great. Even Jonathan VR is kind of stepping up like he was 2 years ago. He's been playing well. But they're still worrying me with their starting pitching just because you've got guys like they're trying to rely on Brandon Woodruff, Zach Davies, Lee Shashin. But their bullpen's been awesome. Josh Hader's amazing. He's striking out the world right now. He has 25 strikeouts in 11 2/3 innings pitched, and they're doing all of this without their all-star closer, Corey Knebel. I mean, Matt Alvarez has been really good. Dan Jennings, Jacob Barnes. You can go on. I mean, their bullpen as a whole pretty much has an ERA everybody under 2. So if their bullpen can keep playing like this, maybe they'll acquire a starter if they're still in the thick of things come more towards the All-Star break, which I definitely see, because that division's been really exciting so far, and everybody's kind of just beating up on the Reds, and it seems like it really might be a 4-team race towards the whole year.
Yeah, that division is definitely very exciting and fun to watch. So I mean, a lot of those teams, they're the ones hot, cold. What about any players? Has a player stood out to you so far this season as someone who's been super hot or super cold, or someone maybe that you thought would be playing a little bit better and isn't?
Well, I mean, I think, Yoenis Cespedes has kind of been off to a pretty bad start. He's batting just over 200, but he leads the league in strikeouts with 34, and that's in only 77 at-bats. So, Cespedes has been off to kind of a bad start. Jan Moncada has picked it up really good recently, but he was off to a really slow start for a while. And honestly, Ohtani's been good. Honestly, Ohtani's been a lot better than what I was thinking. He's been off to lately I think he's dealing with a pretty bad blister injury, but it seems like he's going to be able to still hit through that. He kind of had a bad start against Boston, but then again, that was because of, he had to be taken out early with the blister injury. So it was interesting to see how much that messed him up. But if he can still hit through it, then he's still going to provide, value to the team. And one more guy that's been pretty bad so far this year is Ian Happ on the Cubs. He started off the first pitch of the year, hit it for a home run. He's batting 204, has a ton of strikeouts, only has 2 home runs on the year, and that's coming after he hit the very first pitch of the year. And right now it seems like the Joe Madden of the Cubs is kind of not playing him every day. Javi Baez has been hot. And it seems like they're really trying to move that lineup around, so maybe they're not relying on Ian Happ as much. What about you, Brian? Who you got?
I have a couple players that are actually surprising me. I'm going to go on the pitching end for a player that's surprising me and say that Charlie Morton is way better than I thought he would be this year. I'm guessing that run that he had in the end of the playoffs last year to win that game kind of just rubbed off into the season, because he's looking really, really good. He's posting a 0.64 ERA. He has 3 wins. He's just really, really throwing the ball well. I mean, all those Houston starters are doing well. I mean, Verlander, I think, still has a 0 ERA. I don't think he's given up a run yet. An earned run, I should say. But, I mean, on the hitting side of things, I do have to agree with Cespedes. I was actually thinking of him as being a guy who isn't playing up to, what I would think he'd be doing. I'm going to go on the flip side of another guy who's kind of like Cespedes, not only because he's on my fantasy team, but just because I usually hear something about him every year, and that's Yasuo Puig, who's not really doing anything with the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers really aren't doing much offensively anyways, but Puig's really not hitting the ball at all. I don't think he's hit a home run yet. He's just really struggling at the plate. I've got a chance to watch a couple of his games, and it hasn't even looked close.
Yeah. The thing with that starting pitching for Houston, I was going to talk about Justin Verlander. He's given up 4 earned runs, which has a 1.10 ERA, so which is obviously amazing. That's the third highest in the Astros rotation. Garrett Cole has a .96 ERA, and then Charlie Morton has a .72 ERA. So all three of them, I mean, have just been absolutely incredible. I mean, I know with Charlie Morton, whenever he came over to Houston, he gained 4 miles an hour on his fastball. Sinker to a 95 mile an hour, which is just absolutely filthy. He's been awesome for them, and obviously the Garrett Cole pickup from the Pirates has been really good so far for Houston.
Oh yeah, that Garrett Cole pickup has been amazing for Houston. I mean, if you're looking at it right now, Charlie Morton definitely right now is going to be battling it out with Cole and Verlander for Cy Young. Currently, at this point, I mean, Scherzer's definitely there right now. He's 4-1, well, with a 1.36 ERA. He's up there for the National League as being the top guy. But I mean, Chris Sale only 1 win so far, but still has a 1.23 ERA. So he's been pitching really well, and that's really surprising to me. Is that he only has 1 win, and where Boston is really just destroying the ball, which just shows me that he's not getting much run support while he's been out on the mound for those 6 or 7 innings.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of good Cy Young, how about that game last night that we're recording this Saturday morning between Max Scherzer and Clayton Kershaw out in L.A. Scherzer pretty much outpitched Kershaw, got the win. The Nationals won 5-2. But man, that's just old fashioned. That's what people love. I mean, that's what I love to see. I don't know about everybody, but man, I love a good pitching duel, and it doesn't get. I don't think it gets any better than that. That's probably the top 2 pitchers on the planet going against each other, and man, I mean, that's just so much fun to see.
Yeah, and I think it would have been a little bit better to see if Kershaw was actually Clayton Kershaw this year. I mean, he's still pitching well, but I don't know if something's off or if it's like the contract year, or I really don't know what's going on. I mean, Kershaw's 1-3 with a 2.45 ERA, so I mean, give me that all day. But he's looked a little off. But yeah, definitely that match last night, super good. Kershaw gives up 2 in the first inning, which you don't like to see in one of those type of matches. But yeah, I mean, definitely anytime you have 2 pitchers going at it like that, which is, what we originally thought we were going to see with Bumgarner and Kershaw on opening day, but Bumgarner getting hurt, that's one of those things that you love to watch in baseball, and one of the things I like to watch as well. So, other than that pitching matchup, there really wasn't any other pitching matchups on that day that excited me too much, other than one, which was over in, which one was it? I can't even remember. I lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, it was Bundy versus Bauer. I was going to say earlier for the Cleveland Indians, Bauer was pitching pretty good this year. Bundy has been pitching okay, so that turned out to be quite a pitching duel as well. Not to the same caliber, because those guys aren't Cy Youngs, but definitely anytime you get pitchers out there, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, man. I mean, I love it. I mean, Max Scherzer right now, he's leading the league in strikeouts with 47 and only 33 innings pitched. You've got, Kershaw down there in 7th, but he's still been really good this year. Like you said, maybe not as good as he has been, but a 2.45 ERA, you got to take that. There's been some good starters this year. I think, Lance McCullers is kind of standing out as somebody that's been struggling a little bit with a 5.5 ERA. But, Kluber's been awesome. One guy that's really been standing out that kind of might be flying a little bit under the radar is Patrick Corbin on the Arizona Diamondbacks. He's 3-0, a 1.65 ERA, and he's got 37 strikeouts in 27 innings pitched. So, he's been great. Took that one no-hitter into, I think, like the 7th or the 8th inning. We were just talking before the show about how many teams so far, or how many good pitchers have been taking no-hitters late into games. Last night, Tyson Ross, I think, went into the 7th or the 8th inning with one. There has been quite a few so far. I don't think anybody's gotten one yet, but they are getting pretty close even this early in the year.
Yeah, there's been a ton of games. Bartolo Colon even had a perfect game going to the 7th, which is against it was Houston, right?
Yeah, the good offense in
Yeah,
Houston and on
yeah.
Sunday Night Baseball, and Cologne sits there and takes it. That was awesome to see, man.
Man, that guy just won't give up at all. He won't. He won't give up. He's pitching pretty good for Texas, which is a good bright spot since they've been just getting blown up all year. But yeah, just so many no hitters or perfect games. Shown so far this year from a lot of pitchers and teams that I wouldn't expect it to be from either. Like I don't ever see it like Kluber on watch or Scherzer or Kershaw or anything like that. It's just been weird unknown guys or weird teams that pop up. The Padres won. I think that's Ross that he got the closest the other night going into the 8th so far this year.
Yeah, man. I mean, he was pitching really good, and it's kind of been the surprise guys so far. Like you said, with Cologne, Tyson Ross, maybe not a lot of people are expecting these guys to take no hitters into late in the games for good reason. But man, I mean, you gotta love it because I mean that's baseball. That's why they play because you can't just sit here. I mean, even though we love looking at stats and everything, you have to play the game because you never know when stuff like that's just going to come out of nowhere and happen. And that's what just makes it's so exciting to me, at least.
Yeah, and Acuna still hasn't got called up. That's one thing that's pretty exciting. I'm still waiting to see. I don't know. I don't know if he's been just playing a little bad, which I heard, which he's not heated up quite at AAA, or if they just don't want to bring him up yet. Atlanta's playing well, obviously, but that's one thing I'm still kind of waiting for is to see if Acuna finally gets called up. Do you think? I mean, maybe they're just going to wait for him, or what? What do you think's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were really expecting that to happen as soon as that April 14th day came, and the arbitration pretty much changed for all the prospects and everything. But so far, he's been off to a cold start, at least compared to what he had been doing in AAA. So, and honestly, Preston Tucker, the guy they acquired from the Astros, he's been all right in left field for them. So I guess right now they're not really feel the need to press. So far Acuna in AAA, he's only batted 180 with a 281 OBP and one home run, but 19 strikeouts and 50 at bats. So he's been striking out a lot. So I guess they're just not going to call him up right now. It seems like that there's no real rush for them, even though they have been playing well. They're second, I believe, third maybe. Yeah, third in the NL East at 11-8. So it won't surprise me whenever they do call him up. But right now with him struggling out of the gate at AAA, I guess they're going to just say, okay, well you can just wait it out down there because we're doing all right up here in the majors without you.
Yeah, that's. I'm hoping that he does get called up, just because it'd be fun to watch. I mean, Atlanta's right in the thick of things there, and the the hunt there with Philadelphia, who's actually surprisingly won a bunch of games recently. Their last 10, they've gone 8-2. The Mets kind of cooled off a little bit, not too much. They're still 14-5, but Atlanta's doing really well. They're 11-8. They're staying in those games. They've had a lot of games where they should have won, where they've given up some runs late, but they seem to be scoring a lot of runs, which is definitely something you want to do as a ball club for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Nats went into the Mets to Citi Field and they took 2 out of 3. Almost had the sweep, but bullpen kind of blew up on the Nats on that one. But I mean that was kind of surprising. I mean the Mets were playing awesome ball. The Nats were coming off a bad series against the Rockies, and they went into Citi Field and took 2 out of 3. But I mean the Mets are still doing good. 14-5, you can't complain about that. But maybe coming down off the impossible pace they had, maybe they're finally coming down off of that a little bit. Like you said with Philly, man, they've been playing awesome. Jake Arrieta pitched a really good game for them the other day. Rhys Hoskins has been awesome. Even though Odubel Herrera's been stepping up for them, right now. But with the Mets, I mean, they're doing really good. Asdrubal Cabrera's been awesome for them. Juan Lagares, he's actually been providing some offense at the plate, and they're still waiting on some guys to get going. I mean, Conforto is batting 200, Cespedes is batting 200, Jay Bruce is batting under 200. But the biggest thing, man, they don't have any catcher. Right now they're leaning on guys like Jose Lobaton because, like we talked about it last week, I believe their top 2 catchers are out, so they're going to definitely have to make a move for that. Still, they're just going to wait it out for now, it seems like. But I'll be very surprised if by the end of the year or at least the All-Star break they don't make some moves. But their bullpen's been really good for the Mets so far. Familia still hasn't given up an earned run. AJ Ramos has pitched good. Matt Harvey, it's not sounding good for Matt Harvey, to be honest. I think after his last blow up against Atlanta, the manager kind of came out and said, I'm not going to guarantee that he's going to get another start, at least right now. So that might be, Matt Harvey might either get on the DL, might not get a chance to start again for at least a little while with them. So that could be the end of an era for the Mets. But this seems like it's going to be a much more exciting division than we thought. Kind of the same thing with the West, where you have the person that was the favorite kind of falling back. I mean, the Nationals are in fourth, seem to be playing a little bit a better ball recently, but still, I mean, you got the Mets, Phillies, Atlanta all ahead of them. And with the West, Arizona's been playing awesome, and you've got Colorado and then the Dodgers. So that's two big surprises early on. I mean, like I said, still early, but those are definitely something that stand out so far.
Yeah, with in regards to the Dodgers, I think that they're definitely playing decent. They're playing like they've played any other year. Their offense is just going to squeak by. I think their pitching is just underperforming right now, which is the big part why they win a lot more games. Like I said, Kershaw hasn't looked the same. He's definitely been pitching well, but not, amazingly. He's been giving up some, big runs at tough spots and, some home runs when he normally hasn't. For me, I think the Giants are exactly where they were, where I project them to be early on. Just with their pitching woes and issues, and especially Cueto getting hurt as well, so it's going to be rough for them to come back. I mean, their offense is starting to get it moving. I think that there's a couple teams who are they can turn it around, definitely for sure, and there's also some other teams that might slow it down. I mean, we talked last week about Pittsburgh and their start, and it's kind of slowed down a little bit. They're 4-6 in their last 10. They're still at 12-8 just from their good start, but they've lost a bunch of games against teams that they shouldn't be losing against. They've had some weird matchups so far against Philadelphia and how that's turned out. So yeah, I think it's still a little early for a couple teams. I don't know. I think one team that needs to slow down for definitely is Boston. Like I said, I just don't know if they're going to lose a game for the rest of the month. To be honest, they're just playing too good, and especially whenever you brought up earlier about Bogarts being out, and I've totally forgot that they were out, by the way, and that they've lost some of their big talent, and even the fact that JD Martinez hasn't actually been playing super well. He's heated up a little bit, but, I mean, they're pretty much doing all this by Mookie Betts and Jackie Bradley Jr. So, for the Boston, I think that they eventually got to slow down. I mean, every team throughout the year hits a rough where they go through and maybe win, or lose 10 games or go on, a 5-game losing streak. Every year it always seems to happen. So, for these teams, if you're a fan of them, more than likely, it'll slow down, so just brace yourself for that, or it'll speed back up and a team might go on a 6-game winning streak. So there's always those big swings in baseball, definitely for sure.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, you've got a team like the Indians who are only 9-8. They're a half a game back of the Twins for the Central, and people might be freaking out. Their highest average hitter on the team right now is Francisco Lindor, and he's batting 205. So that's just not going to happen. I mean, Edwin Encarnacion's going to get going. Lindor's going to get going. I mean, Jose Ramirez. You've got so many guys, and they're just too good to be held back like this for that long. I mean, Yonder Alonso has been terrible. Kipnis. Like I said, with Encarnacion, I mean, they've got, a lot of guys who are struggling so far offensively, and they play in a cold stadium, so it could be the same thing that we talked about with the weather. So you just don't know. They'll be fine. A lot of teams that I think were projected to be fine, they'll at least be a lot better than this. The Cubs, the Dodgers, the Nationals, even a team like the Yankees or Baltimore. I mean, they're going to get going. I think the main thing is, White Sox, Kansas City, Cincinnati, it's probably not looking a whole lot better throughout the year. I mean, yeah, they're, Kansas City and Cincinnati, they're going to win better than they are now. I mean, Cincinnati has a .158 win percentage. It's just not possible to be that bad all year. So things are going to have to turn around eventually, but I think, nobody expected them to go after a playoff spot, and they're just not going to. It's not a big surprise. But yeah, man, I mean, it's the best part so far is going to see how these surprising teams can keep it up. Maybe a team like Pittsburgh or, some team out west like a Seattle that's been playing really good, or even Detroit's been playing pretty well, like you mentioned earlier. It's going to be fun to see how long these teams can stay in it, or if they can actually make a miracle run and really contend, that nobody was really expecting. So that, I mean, like I said, that's why they play, because all it takes is just a couple of guys that no one was really expecting much out of, and they start showing up, and then all of a sudden now you're in the thick of things.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things that in baseball that, like I was saying just a little bit ago, is that it's just a fluctuation all year, and it's kind of like a ping pong match. You just watch the ball go back and forth pretty much until it kind of settles and someone finally eventually wins. And that's just kind of how baseball is. It's just, it's anyone's game at any night. You never know what's going to happen out there. I definitely think once the weather starts heating up, it'll get more pitcher friendly, and it won't be as offensive heavy as it's been early on in the season, because there's been a lot of big numbers. I mean, this past week, it seems like every day was a 10 spot or a 14 spot put up by a team, and usually early in the season you don't really see that as much, since the hitters aren't really more so in the groove. And I like we're saying, I think it's just more so just because of weather. So I mean, definitely going to be fun to watch further down the line. I mean, one guy who still came out of nowhere, and I was just looking through the rookies just to see who might be ahead for the Rookie of the Year so far, and apparently he's eligible for it, is that Christian Villanueva for the Padres, who, we talked about him a couple weeks ago. He had that 3 home run game, and he's still hitting home runs. He has like 6 now, so like I said, I have no clue where this guy even came from. I read about it. Apparently he came from a league in Mexico last year, and like we said, played like 20-some games maybe with the Padres. So, yeah, I mean, definitely surprising in my book.
Yeah, I mean, he's been great for them, and they really needed somebody to kind of stand out for them, and he's been crushing the ball. Colin Moran's been playing well for the Pirates. Tyler Austin, he's still rookie eligible. He's been good. Scott Kingery, he's kind of being a super utility guy for the Phillies. He's playing all over. He's playing outfield, infield, and pretty much any position they're asking. When it comes to pitching so far. The Padres have another guy that kind of came out of nowhere, Joey. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Lucchini. He's been pitching really well for them. 4 games started, a 1.66 ERA, and more than a strikeout per inning. A left-hander. He's 24 years old. He kind of came out of nowhere, honestly. I mean, at least I haven't really heard much about him. So far, yeah. I mean, a lot of the rookies that we kind of picked to be in the Rookie of the Year thing haven't been called up yet. We're still waiting on guys like Willie Calhoun or Michael Kopech or, like you mentioned, Acuna, Senzel. There's a lot of guys out there. So it's really early, still to see. But yeah, I mean, it's always fun to hear about guys coming out of nowhere. I mean, right now, Jed Lowry, he's been amazing for the A's. He's got 6 home runs, 22 RBIs, and he's batting close to 380, so that's been great. Matt Chapman, their third baseman's been playing awesome for them, 5 home runs, 293 average. So, Oakland had, like you mentioned in the offseason, Oakland has an exciting lineup, and I think you're obviously right so far, because they've really been playing well. I mean, Piscotty, Olsen, Canna, they have a lot of guys in that lineup that's pretty threatening for opposing teams. They still need to get they still got to get their pitchers figured out. Their rotation's been pretty bad so far with guys like Kendall Graveman, who got crushed last night by Boston, and Daniel Megden. But Manaya's been good for them, and if that lineup can keep up, they'll be a really fun team to watch. At least try to finish 500, and you never know if they can sneak into a wild card spot or not.
Oh yeah. Oakland definitely crushing the ball. Jed Lowry, that dude is, ever since I dropped him on fantasy, he's just been hitting a home run, it seems like, every night. So that was one mistake. But yeah, Oakland definitely crushing the ball. They're going to have a tough task going ahead of them now because they got to face Boston. That's never fun since they're playing so well. But yeah, especially with those rookies, one guy who I had up there in the Rookie of the Year category, obviously beaten out by Acuna, but I had, Jack Flaherty for the Cardinals, and, I thought he was going to have a really good year so far because he started not the opening day, but that opening-ish week on the 3rd of April against Milwaukee, but hasn't even pitched since. I think they sent him down. He had a really good outing, too. He didn't win or lose the game, only went 5 innings, gave up 6 hits, 1 earned run, only walked 1 batter, but struck out 9 guys, and then he was reassigned back to the minors. So, kind of unfortunate that they did that. I definitely understand it, but definitely a lot of those rookies, we are waiting for them to come up, but some are having good. And one guy that we didn't talk about is that Hector Velasquez for Boston, since we're talking about Boston on the show so much, since they can't seem to stop being a topic of subject. But yeah, he's one rookie who's doing really well this year too. He's like 3-0, pitching super well, and I think a big part why they're kind of just on a roll.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, with their 5th spot, they've really, when I thought that was going to be a big concern until they got Pomeranz and Eduardo Rodriguez back, those guys have actually been really good. They've been winning games for him pretty much. It's fun to just, check stuff out like that. Arenado, he just came back from the suspension last night. Obviously, he was pretty upset because he hit a 2-run home run last night. But Charlie Blackmon's been really good for. I just wanted to mention the Rockies since they're playing pretty good right now, 11-10. But they've been having a pretty long road trip, so they've been playing good against teams like the Nationals. Lost last night to the Cubs, but yeah, really, we don't know because there's been a ton of guys for the Rockies so far, at least, that have been off to such slow starts. Ryan McMahon and Ian Desmond are both batting right around 150. And with the Rockies, usually you think the lineup's not going to be the problem at all, but some of these guys are off to a slow start. Even Cargo around 230, Trevor Story 222. So yeah, I like the Rockies. I think they'll end up getting past. Honestly, I think the Diamondbacks are really going to be for real this year. I think their pitching's holding up really good, and I don't even think their lineup for the Diamondbacks has gotten going yet. Goldschmidt got off to a really slow start. He'll get going sometime, hopefully soon for them. The main thing I wanted to say about the Diamondbacks is it's terrible, but Taijuan Walker, he did tear his UCL, so he will have to have Tommy John surgery. So that's a big blow for that organization.
Oh yeah, that's super bad. Especially since I was talking about him last week being a really good spot for them, pitching well and better than I thought. And about the Rockies is they get to play at home field today against Hitters at Hitters Park. Home run field as people like to call it, Coors Field actually. But the big question is, how many runs is Darvish going to give up today?
It's a great question. He's been bad, and there's no, he was great for the Rangers last year. He was really good for the Dodgers, and then it's kind of like the playoffs started, and he really struggled, especially in the World Series. And a lot of guys were oh, well, it's because of this, he'll be fine. And I thought he was going to be fine. So far with them, he's pitched 3 games, 15 innings pitched. He's given up more hits than innings pitched, and he's given up 10 earned runs. His ERA is around 6, which him and Quintana both have been terrible for them. Quintana's ERA is over 8. So they need to get it figured out, and their next 2 starts are coming in Colorado, so that's not going to make anything easier for them. But everybody was talking about how the Cubs were going to run away with that division because of that rotation, and it was so head and shoulders above the rest of that division, which on paper it is. You've got Lester, you've got Darvish, Quintana, Chatwood, even Kyle Hendricks. But so far they've been struggling. There's no way around it. Darvish, like you said, it's almost starting to become a concern. Maybe something did happen in the World Series last year that he just can't get figured out, or opponents are picking up on that he doesn't know yet. Because if it's been that long of a struggle, you honestly got to start wondering if something's actually wrong with him.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 7. I'm gonna say 7 runs. I'm gonna say 7. Okay. I think he gives up 7. I don't think he goes past 4 innings tonight. And
that would be.
Yeah, and I feel like I still feel like the Cubs will probably win the game just because it's Coors Field and they've been just crushing the ball. Javier Baez, who I was on from the beginning of the year, as a defensive side standpoint of a player, and definitely a guy that was in my top 5 second baseman. Is absolutely crushing the ball for them. He has 6 home runs and 20 RBIs. He leads that team in home runs and RBIs, and that's Javier Baez, by the way, the defensive guy. So that just goes to show you how the Cubs are playing.
Yeah, he's been awesome, and the main thing with him is he's cut down on the strikeouts. You know, he's only struck out 14 times and 62 at bats. That's awesome for him. You know, I mean, normally he's one of those guys that's going to lead the league in strikeouts because of how big of the swings he takes. But he's been great for them so far. You know, they still haven't gotten anything from Anthony Rizzo since he's been out with that oblique injury. I think he's finally back now. But yeah, I mean, that lineup has been doing good because of Bryant, Zobrist, like you said, with Javier Baez and Kyle Schwarber. He's even been getting getting going a little bit. Hit a home run yesterday. But Wilson Contreras, you know, he's hitting for a high average, but he has no home runs and only 4 RBIs. So once the Cubs get Contreras going, Addison Russell, Ian Happ, especially Anthony Rizzo, you know, that team's lineup is stacked. There's no way for it. I'd say probably them and Milwaukee, definitely the top 2 lineups in that division. But the Cubs, I mean, they've really got that firepower in the middle with Rizzo and Bryant once they're really hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, and you know, man, it's just I feel so bad for John Gray. I thought John Gray was going to have a good year for the Rockies this year, and he just got absolutely crushed last night. This season he's 1-4, has a 6.75 ERA. You know, Cubs put up 16 runs last night against the Rockies there in Coors Field, and you know, Baez hit the home run and Schwarber hit the home run. But other than that, they scored a ton of runs just by just running around the bases again since they put up that 15 spot. So, I mean, the Cubs have been putting up a lot of runs this season, and their record doesn't really reflect it just because they've been giving up a lot of runs. But, yeah, I think there's some of those guys for the Cubs once they start getting going, and, you know, Rizzo's back. Definitely going to be fun to watch, and I definitely think that lineup will get clicking. You know, the Rockies definitely underperforming a little bit. I mean, they are 11-10, so the record is 500 above 500. So that's one bright spot. But yeah, the Rockies have definitely been a disappointment in my book so far this season.
Yeah, I mean they've allowed a lot more, you know, runs allowed, 104, runs scored 81. So they've definitely allowed a good bit more runs than what they've scored, which is never a good thing. But like I said, I mean, you know, once they get that lineup, I just don't think that lineup's been anywhere close to got going yet. You know, of course their rotation is going to be bad. You know, they put a lot of money into that bullpen that's done pretty well so far. So we'll see. I think they're still a little bit too early to tell on. You know, just to go into the runs scored, I think a surprise right now is Atlanta actually leads all of the NL in runs scored with 107. You know, they've been awesome so far. And the Arizona Diamondbacks actually lead it in runs allowed. They've only allowed 60 earned runs so far. So, you know, kind of, like I said, with Arizona starting pitching has been great. But I don't think we've talked enough right now about Atlanta's lineup. What do you think about that so far? Do you think it's sustainable? Who's been standing out for you so far without Acuna in there? So what do you think so far about Atlanta?
Ozzie Albies. That's all I got to say. Ozzie Albies. Ozzie Albies is probably one of the better players I've ever got to watch play. I love that guy so much. I know you're a Nats fan. If there was one team I could jump ship from the Reds on in the National League as a team to watch, it would be the Braves. They are so fun to watch. I mean, Freddie Freeman obviously is the guy that everyone would point to and be like, oh, you know, Freddie Freeman definitely is that offense. But I'm telling you, I think Ozzie Albies makes that offense what it is. He gets on base. He has an OBP of 352, so he's not the best on base guy. Of course, that's Freddie Freeman, and you know Ryan Flaherty, who's having a really good year. Is playing like all the games for him. Surprising enough, I think if there's one guy in this whole lineup that has surprised me so far, because I kind of expected Ozzie Albies to be good, not this good, but good. It's definitely gonna be Kurt Suzuki, who definitely is a guy who's not one that would jump out the page. Obviously, he's had years with Oakland, and he's bounced around here and there, backup catcher, reliable guy. But he's really like solidified himself as a catcher. Obviously, with Tyler Flowers, getting hurt, he's had to kind of step in there. And in 15 games, He has a 311 average, 400 OBP, 3 home runs, 9 RBIs, only struck out twice. He's doesn't strike out at all for that team. I mean, their strikeouts are really high. I think a lot of these guys are striking out a lot, but man, the Braves are fun to watch. This is the team I expected last year for sure.
Well, as everybody that listens will remember, I actually picked, thanks to Paul Sporer of the Sleeper in the Bus podcast, I actually picked Ozzie Albies to be my Silver Slugger winner for the NL second baseman. So that's looking pretty good so far. But as you said, they're a really exciting team, and I'm sure you saw the news. But they actually signed Jose Bautista to be a third baseman for them to a minor league contract. So that should bring even more excitement on, and maybe he'll hit a couple more home runs and have a couple more bat flips and make everybody mad again.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you all just heard me say about the Atlanta Braves, just throw it out the door, because now they have Jose Bautista. I take it all back. I'm not going to watch any of their games.
It was definitely, I don't think them signing him was a surprise move for at least me. But when I saw that they were going to have him play third base, that was pretty surprising in my opinion. I mean, like you said, Ryan Flaherty, he's been playing third base for them. He's been playing pretty well. I mean, he's been leading the team in average and pretty close up there and on base. So he's been playing really well for him. I guess they're not expecting that to be sustained, or they just wanted some depth. But yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see if he actually does come up and does play third base for them. I feel like he was pretty much last year a liability in right field, much less third base. But hey, it might work out for him. And like we said, man, that division is going to be exciting this year, at least with exciting teams to watch.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely if Acuna does end up coming up, you got to think that the guy that's going to shift out if he starts not playing too well is obviously Preston Tucker. I mean, Preston Tucker is definitely having, a good year so far. 18 RBIs, so he actually leads the team in RBIs. Has 3 home runs, but I mean, definitely, I think a lineup with Freeman, Markakis, Acuna, Ozzie Albies, Dansby Swanson. Even if you throw Batista in there and Enciarte, and if Kurt Suzuki can keep getting on base like he's doing, I think that lineup is really good for them. I do definitely like the Braves a lot. I wish I would have been a little bit more into them so far, but I mean, it's still early, so we'll see if they can keep it going or not.
Yeah, and their pitching, I think, does need a little bit of help. I mean, Julio Teheran's not been good for them so far, and Vizcaíno hasn't been great for them as their closer. He does have a 1.86 ERA, but he does have 2 blown saves so far, so that's kind of been a problem for them. They might try to make a move for a reliever if they're staying in contention, or they could try another piece. They do have some good young pitching prospects. I just don't think they're really ready to be called up yet. So far, maybe I guess they just kind of have to wait out Julio Teheran. Anibal Sanchez has actually been good for them so far, but I did see that he got injured actually in pregame warmups the other day. So I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for, but Matt Wisler stepped up very nicely for them. But yeah, I mean, Atlanta's been good so far. They took 2 out of 3 from the Nats whenever they went down there to play them. I'm not sure how many times they've gotten to play Miami yet, but I know a lot of teams are going to be beating up on Miami so far. What do you think about what the Marlins have been doing? I mean, 5-14, they were competitive in a lot of the games so far, especially against the Cubs opening series and a couple games against the Pirates. But it seems like, they finally got Real Muto back. But what do you think about the Marlins so far? Have they been surprising about what you expected? What's your thoughts on them?
No, the Marlins are definitely what I expected from them. Bottom dwellers. I mean, it's the Marlins. I mean, they have some young guys. They're definitely doing some things, fun to watch, of course. But I mean, they just some nights they just don't hit the ball at all. A lot of nights, and it's going to be every night, they can't pitch. I definitely think that. I'm still upset with Jeter and how he's done things there. I mean, I'm not a Marlins fan by any means, but if I was a Marlins fan, I would be pretty much livid that you didn't get anything. I mean, you hardly got anything for 4 high-quality players that you traded out. I mean, of course, D. Gordon's playing really well in Seattle. Hardly got anything for him. Yelich is playing well in with the Brewers. Hardly got anything. I mean, they got some good guys back for Stanton. Nothing super extreme that you would expect from MVP, but I feel like, you know, Brinson's definitely a very, very, very good player and a nice bright spot for the Marlins. But if that's just going to be a trend with them, what's next? I mean, are they just going to trade, you know, Brinson? I mean, they need pitching help. That's what they really need. They need a bunch of pitching. And the one bright spot and the thing that I love is they blew up the Yankees 9-1 against Tanaka. Thought that was awesome, but a lot of games I just see 0 spots put up, like every game, or 1 run scored, and it's just I don't know. Miami is definitely in a rough spot right now.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, you know, the main thing that really stands out to me right now is their pitching. I mean, they've given up 117 runs on the year, which is 13 more than anyone else in the NL, and it is 7 more than anyone else in the entire league. You know, their pitching staff's been terrible. I mean, Brad Ziegler's been really bad for them, the veteran relief pitcher. They have 2 rookies, Dylan Peters and Caleb Smith, who both have ERAs right around 7. Their starting pitching has just been really bad. Their pitching in general has been pretty bad. They're going to have to get that. You know, it's different to be rebuilding, sure, but when you have young guys like Peters and Smith that are getting crushed, it's just going to hurt their confidence. It's going to hurt your team's confidence because, you know, they just don't have a chance. It just really, you know, it definitely stinks for Marlins fans because they have that new stadium. I know their attendance isn't normally great anyway, even when they were great, but it's been really low this year. And it just must, you know, you stink because I know a couple of Marlins fans and they were really happy whenever Jeffrey Loria sold the team. And you think Jeter's going to come in and definitely keep them competitive, and he just totally, you know, throws everything away pretty much. Lewis Brinson, he was pretty much their biggest prospect that they got back this offseason from trading everybody, and he was off to a really slow start. You know, just 2 nights ago, he actually hit his first 2 home runs of the year, which is big, but he's still batting around 152. So yeah, man, I mean, it's definitely going to be, as we expected, a long season in Miami. But the one thing, and like you said, you're a Reds fan, the one thing that's really been standing out for me is how bad the Reds have been. I mean, 3-16, I knew the team wasn't going to be great or competitive by any means, but I thought with that lineup, you know, with Joey Votto, Scooter Gennett, Tucker Barnhart, a couple of guys, I know Suarez got hurt. I thought they could at least win a couple more games than this so far, man. What do you think about what's going on with the Reds?
I don't even know what's going on with the Reds. Votto hasn't hit a home run all year. Scooter Gennett obviously hasn't hit a home run. It's to be expected. I mean, Scooter Gennett is not one of those guys that's just gonna blow up the world. He's not gonna suddenly be. I mean, there is a thing called Joey Batista syndrome where you go from being pretty much a nobody to a 50 home run guy overnight. But that's just not Scooter Gennett. He hasn't been playing that well. They've been hitting the ball. I mean, pretty much all their guys, aside from Billy Hamilton and, you know, Adam Duvall, all have 200 or above averages. So, I mean, they're hitting the ball. They're not striking out a lot. I mean, a couple guys have 10 or more strikeouts. I mean, Votto has 10 strikeouts, which is un-Votto-esque. But Billy Hamilton is, I don't know, on a whole nother level, as I can say, and not a whole nother good level. He's on a whole nother level of just not playing good baseball. I mean, when you strike out 22 times, I mean, you got to be doing something just to, you know, whiff at the ball, and he's never been good at getting on base. There's this thing about Billy Hamilton that he was going to be a super stealer, and, you know, in the minors, I think one season he stole like 130 bases or some ridiculous number. But whenever he come up, he just can't get on base at all. And if you can't get on base, you can't steal. And that's just how it is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they haven't, like you said, with their offense, they're tied with the Detroit, or actually they're tied with the Kansas City Royals for the lowest runs scored in the league. Only 56 runs scored so far this year. You know, so that's definitely been that's definitely been tough for them so far. Like I said, they made a manager change, so we'll see if guys can, if they'll step up for their new manager or if they'll start to turn things around a little bit. We'll just have to wait and see. But man, 3-16, that's pretty rough so far.
Oh yeah, and back on the Marlins note is they've only scored more than 3 runs 6 times this season. Only 6 times. And it hasn't, I mean, they've only won 5 games, and in those 5 games, I think they've scored more than 3 runs 3 times out of those. So a couple of those games they've lost, they scored more than 3, but they've just been scoring a lot of 1 runs and 3 runs. And, with them and the Reds, you can't win games that way. I mean, when you're giving up 12 or 10 a night, you got to score something to get in there and show something. But, I mean, the Reds are definitely a lot better than the Marlins just because they have Votto. I mean, the Marlins don't have a player of Votto's caliber on that team. So I think once Votto gets going, I mean, obviously, Ohio the weather there is ridiculous. I lived there for a bit. It's not easy. You can have a season, every single season in one day. It can snow, rain, be 90 degrees, and then switch to the fall weather all in one day. So definitely weather, of course, is a big topic. And I think that once it passes, I think the Reds will start to be a little bit better. But yeah, they're just not good. Them and the Marlins definitely not very good.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's been a fun start to the year so far. I think me and you talked about we might be going to a Nats game later on this month. So I mean, it's been interesting. Hopefully the weather gets better. I mean, that's the main thing. It's still been cold, windy here, everywhere. It seems like they're playing baseball. That's up north or even in the up there. So hopefully it gets turned around. Hopefully we can get some more, figure out how much of these stats are real or how many of these teams that are off to good starts are for real or not. But hey, I mean, even if it's really cold, it's still baseball, so we can't complain.
Yeah, definitely. And the segment that I love the most is to look at how bad the Orioles are in the standings, and we'll just go through the standings. And like you said earlier, we are doing this on Saturday. It's April 21st, so these are the stats currently. For the American League East, we have Boston at 17-2. For you at home that are good at math or not so good, that's an .895 win percentage so far, which is ridiculous. Toronto's at 13-6. They're 4 games back. You got the Yankees at 9-9, 7.5 back. Tampa at 6-13, 11 games back. And then the Orioles at 6-14, 11.5 back.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we said. I mean, Boston's been amazing. Toronto's been a surprise for me, at least. I wasn't really expecting them to be that good this year, especially the way they're doing it without Donaldson. It seems. Yankees, I think they'll get hot. Tampa, not super surprising with all the starting pitching injuries that they've had so far. And Baltimore, their pitching's been bad as we expected, but the bigger surprise is that their offense hasn't gotten going yet.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about them is they've played a lot more on the road than they have at home. They've played 13 games on the road as opposed to 7 games at home. They're 3-4 at home, whereas they're 3-10 on the road. And like I said, a lot of those road places they've went to, other than Houston, that's the only one that hasn't been super cold. And I just feel like a lot of those players just aren't used to it. So yeah, I'm hoping that they'll turn it around. I still think they will. So we'll just see how it has to go. The Central, where no games are being played ever, you got Minnesota at 8-6, leading the division. Cleveland is right behind them at 9-8, a half game back. Detroit, surprisingly, 8-10, 2 games back. Chicago 4-12, 5 games back. And then Kansas City 4-14. So Kansas City, another one of those dumpster teams in the back, not playing that well either.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City and the White Sox, we expected them to be down. Detroit's kind of been a little bit of a surprise so far, only a couple games under 500. Cleveland, I'm not worried about them. I don't think anybody should be. I think their lineup will get going, and their starting pitching seems like it'll always be there. Minnesota, they've been a surprise team. Like you said, it's tough because these teams have played so little games. I mean, Minnesota's played 14 games compared to Boston, who's played 19. So it's kind of tough to say. They had a really exciting series down in Puerto Rico where Jose Barrios pitched great. Francisco Lindor hit a home run for their hometown, so that was really cool to see. I think it's going to be a battle. I think Cleveland will end up passing Minnesota before the year's over with by a good bit, winning that division. But you pick Minnesota. It's definitely going to be, I think it's going to be those two teams above the rest. And so far it's kind of shaking out like that. And as the year goes on, it's just going to get further apart, in my opinion.
Yeah, and moving on to the West, we have the 3-team race as Houston at 14-7, now leading the division. You got the Angels at 13-7, a half game back. You got Seattle at 10-8, 2.5 back. You got Oakland at 9-11, 4.5 games back. And then you got Texas at 7-14, 7 games back. And the surprising thing that jumped out to me here is Angels have lost 4 in a row, and Ohtani Fest seems to have starting to simmer down. Everyone is had a lot of fun dancing around and drinking and, partying, and it's getting to that 3 a.m. ish, and everyone's ready to go home. So Ohtani Fest is kind of fizzling. He did go up against, which we didn't talk about, went up against Boston Red Sox and got kind of lit up, had a blister on his hand. So, that might have came in and been a big part of it. But yeah, definitely the Angels, losing 4 in a row. You definitely don't want to do that in a division with Houston.
Yeah, I mean, I think Houston's just a much better team than probably everybody else, even though the Angels got out to that hot start, like you mentioned. Ohtani dealing with a blister right now, so hopefully he'll be all right, but it seems like it's going to be fun to see. Maybe he'll get to hit more now, until that blister heals up. Seattle, like I said last week, they're a fun team to watch. D. Gordon's getting hot for them. He's stolen 9 bases without getting caught so far, batting over 300. He's been fun. They finally got Cruz back, so maybe that lineup can get going. And Oakland, I mentioned them, a good bit with their lineup and starting rotation. In Texas, it's going to be a long year, like we thought. Matt Moore's been really bad for them, but hey, if they got guys like Bartolo Colon stepping up, then at least they might not be good, but they'll be fun to watch. They still got Beltre. They still got Joey Gallo, who seems to be only be able to hit home runs. Obviously, losing Elvis Andrus really hurts them. But I mean, they'll be fun to watch with guys that are pretty good personalities. Especially if they keep Bartolo, and maybe if Tim Lincecum ever gets a chance. He's out right now on the 60-day DL with a blister issue, so that's a pretty bad blister. But yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting a whole lot because that's a really tough division, and Texas seems to be like they're getting ready to go into a rebuilding stage.
Yeah, and moving over to the National League is a bunch of teams actually playing baseball as opposed to the American League. You got the National League East with the 4-team race as it is you got the New York Mets still out ahead at 14-5. You got Philadelphia at 12-7, 2 games back. You got Atlanta at 11-8, 3 games back. You got Washington at 10-10, 4.5 back. And then there they are, Miami Marlins 5-14, 9 games back.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing with the Nationals. Like I'll talk about whenever we get to the Dodgers is they're missing probably their biggest piece, on offense. Maybe the second biggest piece with Daniel Murphy. So that really hurts. And they'll get him back. I think the Nationals will be fine. I think they'll end up winning that division. I think the Mets are off to a hot start, probably a lot better than everybody expected. I think they'll cool off a little bit. And Philly and Atlanta will definitely be competitive, not pushovers like last year. But I just think the Nationals' skill and especially their top 2 starters with that lineup is just going to be too much for everybody else to handle.
Oh, for sure. And, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the weather really sucks. And one thing about being on the East Coast with this stupid weather is Washington's got to play there. And they're 3-7 at home. So, these other teams, obviously, yes, they play in the weather too. So someone's got to win the game. It's the same condition. But a lot of teams who are kind of used to these type of conditions, just because that's where they are during September or the later in the year, kind of got to get a better feel for baseball if they're pitching or hitting, and I think that's one thing that's kind of hurt the Nationals is they're 3-7 at home, but they're playing 7-3 on the road, and a lot of those road games have been in warm weather locations. So I mean, hence last night when they played the Dodgers, they won 5-2, and they looked good. So that's definitely one thing is with them is their home record is not good right now, but I expect that to change for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, like I said, I mean, I'm not worried about them so far, especially, right now. They do have some pretty big injuries. I mean, Adam Eaton's out, Anthony Rendon's out. They're still waiting on to get Murphy back. So, yeah, I mean, it's still way too early to be freaking out if you're a Nats fan, a Cubs fan, or a Dodgers fan.
Yeah, for sure. The National League Central, you got Pittsburgh still on top at 12-8. St. Louis right on their heels, 11-8, half game back. Milwaukee 12-9, a half game back. The Chicago Cubs 9-8, 1.5 back. And then the Cincinnati Reds at 3-16, 8.5 back. So, I mean, a lot of these teams, even though they're playing bad, still not 11.5 back like the Rays and the Orioles are because of the hot start by the Red Sox. But definitely in this division was probably the tightest division out of all of them so far, with those three top teams only separated by a half game.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of covered this one pretty good. I think, it's going to be fun between those four teams, and hopefully Kansas City. I mean, hopefully Cincinnati can at least win a couple of games to give something for their fans to enjoy instead of just being kind of miserable.
Yeah, and a lot of these teams are kind of even. There's no big real split. Like a lot of this other division, there's a huge split on the road or home as they're playing. Like, Los Angeles, the Angels, for example, play much better on the road so far. They're 9-1 on the road, 4-6 at home. But this division is pretty much split. I mean, all these teams have, they're Pittsburgh's 5-4 at home, but 7-4 on the road, and St. Louis is 3-4 at home and 8-4 on the road. So there's not like a big difference on playing worse or better at any one location. I mean, even the Cubs, they're 3-4 at home and 6-4 on the road. So, I mean, this is probably one of the tighter divisions so far, and definitely one to watch the whole season. Another division to definitely watch is going to be the National League West, which has Arizona sitting at top at 13-6. Then you got Colorado at 11-10, 3 games back. You got the Dodgers at 8-10, 4.5 back. San Francisco at 8-11, 5 back, and then San Diego at 8-13, 6 games back. So this is definitely another division that's kind of got flipped around.
Yeah, I mean, I picked San Francisco to do pretty well this year. Obviously, all their injuries with even Cueto going down, so they've had Samardzija, Cueto, and Bumgarner all out. They finally got Samardzija back last night, and he pitched well for him. But that offense has been bad still, even with the pickups of Longoria and McCutchen. They've kind of been off to cold starts. I mean, even though McCutchen had a couple of home runs, Longoria has not been good for them, and they're going to have to get scoring. Hunter Pence went on the DL, so that won't help anything. But yeah, I mean, the Dodgers, they'll probably they'll once they get Turner back, or once maybe Seager, Bellinger, Puig, like you mentioned, to get going, they'll be fine. But I think they do have some real competition this year with Arizona. I think Arizona's for real, especially with that starting pitching. And I think Arizona and LA could definitely battle it out with Colorado and San Francisco battling it out for third place, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, the big surprise to me as well is Colorado's not playing well at home, which you wouldn't expect since they know the ballpark and, they play there a lot. They're only 2-5 as opposed to, on the road where they're 9-5. So, definitely one thing that Colorado needs to start doing is playing better at home. But I think, Arizona, super for real. I didn't like them as much at the start of the year just because I felt like they didn't really do much to solidify losing a guy like JD Martinez. But, Gerard Dyson's not really been doing well. That was one guy that I thought would have helped him out a lot. Alex Avila isn't really doing well, and I thought that was a great pickup for him. I mean, he's struck out 18 times, does have a home run, but only 2 RBIs, is only hitting 114. Goldschmidt, who every week that we've talked about him seems to raise his average. His average is now up to 242. He started out at the beginning of the season when we talked about him at 0.95 and then crept up to the 100s, and now is almost at 300. So he's starting to get on fire. And Jake Lamb is a guy who got hurt as well, so they're doing a lot of this without him. I mean, Lamb only played in 4 games so far this year, and he's out with that injury. But David Peralta's been really, really good, which is very surprising to me. And a guy that hasn't really shown up yet I'm waiting for him to come back, is Steven Souza Jr. So I think that once they get some of these guys healthy, they're just going to keep putting the pedal to the metal and probably win the division, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they'll be really competitive because, like you said, they still, their biggest guy to replace JD Martinez. I mean, you can't replace JD Martinez, but the thing that they were going to try to at least help with, which is Steven Souza Jr., they haven't had him yet. So once they get him back, and Lamb back, hopefully sooner rather than later for them, it's just going to help them out even more. So yeah, that'll probably be honestly the biggest, I guess, surprise competition for the Dodgers this year. Not really. I think a lot of people expected the Dodgers to win and Arizona to be second, but I don't think a lot of people were expecting it to be close. And it won't surprise me one bit if it is close now, seeing how both teams have been playing so far.
Oh yeah, so I mean, definitely all these teams. Like I said, still early, but I definitely want to thank everyone who has been listening on YouTube, iTunes. Be sure just to still leave us a comment. Just let us know anything that you've seen that we may have missed that shocked you, a player that you think is playing really well, even what team you like. So, I mean, maybe you can join me in my sorrow of the Orioles playing crappy and Logan with the Nationals not playing up to par. So, I mean, like I said, if you're not a Boston Red Sox fan, you've had your ups and downs all season. It'll definitely get better. Like I said, with the weather, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, just for my sake of hating the cold weather. But yeah, thank you everyone who listens. Definitely for sure, and make sure you leave us likes and comments.
Yeah, thanks everybody so much, listening everywhere. Like Ryan said, just leave us, 5 stars on iTunes, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, or reach out, a Twitter account, Talking Around the Bases. My Twitter account, Hatman with 2 N's, 1 5, and that's it. And we love hearing from you guys. We like talking baseball with you guys, and we just like watching baseball together. So thanks, Ryan, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you on next week's episode.